Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is part 3 of my video on the Koker Trilogy. I'm just going to show the box again in case you're watching these videos separately. This is the box. This has 3 films in it. And the first thing I want to do is to say thanks to everyone who's left comments and watched the earlier part 1 and 2 of the videos. I really appreciate all the comments. I really am enjoying this box set, and I finished now the third film in the trilogy, which is called Through the Olive Trees. And if you go back to part 1 of my video, I do an unboxing of these films. This is part 3. You can see how it's very interesting the way that Criterion Collection has done the packaging here. And again, you can see that in part 1 of the video. But this is the third film. It's called Through the Olive Trees. And this is the back of it. And this just has on it a new 2K digital restoration. It's got a new interview with Abbas Kiarostami's son, which is very interesting. Highly recommend watching that. And then a new conversation between scholar Jamshid Akrami and critic Godfrey Cheshire. That's also a very good discussion about Kiarostami's work, and in particular this film. Now, I really enjoyed this film, and I actually made some notes while I was watching it. Someone asked in the comments, I think I had mentioned in maybe the first video, that when I watch Kiarostami's work, I'm drawn into the film. What does that mean exactly? Well, for me, it means that once I start watching one of his films, I really can't look away from the screen. I feel like every scene is a painting. It's very poetic, very meditative, and so I'm totally engrossed in watching the film. I know with other films that I watch, other TV shows, I might get distracted, I might pick up my phone, things like that. I don't really do that when I'm watching a Kiarostami film. I'm very engaged in the film itself. So while I was watching this one, I made a few notes about it. A lot of the film, just to give you a quick plot summary, and again, not to spoil anything, but a lot of the film obviously centers around the city of Koker, which has been through an earthquake in 1990. This film takes place in 1994, or is shot in 1994. Much of the film is about a potential relationship between two of the actors in the film. One of the things that Kiarostami continues to do in this film is to mix truth and fiction. There's in the supplement, his son talks about how he will many times work with his actors and will create a scenario that elicits a response from the actor. And so this film is a film about the filming of the prior film, if that makes sense. So the prior film is And Life Goes On, which is primarily a road picture with a father and son going back to Koker, and they're going through the town that's experienced an earthquake. And you do get the sense that the lead character in And Life Goes On is the director himself, right? So a lot of this material is very autobiographical, or at least it feels that way. I should say also too, I'm not an expert in Kiarostami films. I'm definitely an appreciator of his work, and so I'm experiencing these things. Many times it's very hard to describe these films because you really have to experience them yourselves, and that's why I recommend picking up the Koker trilogy, especially these last couple of days of the Barnes & Noble Criterion Collection 50% off sale. It's a good time to pick up this box set or any one of the box sets from the Criterion Collection. Kiarostami himself, in many of the supplemental materials, will acknowledge that he's mixing truth and fiction to reach a higher truth, or he even will say truth and lies to get to a higher truth. And I really feel like, at least for me anyway, these films represent life itself, because they're a mixture of good and bad, beauty and ugliness, everything happening all at once, which again is kind of a spiritual idea, with the fact that you might get the sense that everything is happening all at once, or maybe that everything is a film, because that's the other thing that you get, or that's the other experience that you get with this movie. Much of the story, as I mentioned, centers on an actor and actress in the film. The last hour of the film is mostly about them, and it's shooting one scene from the prior film. And so there's many takes of that scene. There is an actor that plays the director, and you feel like that is really Kiarostami filming a scene from And Life Goes On, even though we're watching Through the Olive Trees. So again, he's peeling the onion back and giving us this layered approach to life, that maybe it's all one big film. It's all happening at once, those types of ideas. And so it gives you a very meditative effect. a very spiritual effect. And so those are the things I like, especially about his films, but certainly about many films that I watch. So that part of the film to me is very engaging. It's one of my favorite parts of this trilogy, is that last section of Through the Olive Trees, because what you're seeing happen is this potential relationship develop between two actors in the film. You're not sure if it's real or not, or whether it's really happening, for real. But in between takes, the main actor starts to talk to the woman that's in the scene, and she doesn't really respond at all. There's no dialogue from the woman except for the dialogue that she's been given for the scene itself. And so he really likes her. And so he starts to talk about them being together and getting married and things like that. And so that part of the film to me is very engaging. At the end of the film, you also see that zigzag pathway up, which Kiarostami describes as an open path. He likes to have these types of open paths, I think, in roads and walking paths and things like that, meaning that the story itself in many ways is open-ended, right? You're not really sure what happens at the end of this film, whether it's a happy ending or whether it's not a happy ending. He leaves many of these films very open-ended, which is, again, like life itself, I feel like. So anyway, that's the latter part of the film. I don't feel like I'm really spoiling anything there. You really have to experience these films. I recommend watching these in order. So you'd be starting with Where's the Friend's House? Here's the front and the back of that film. I'll show that again. And you do see a couple of the actors, older, of course, in this last film, Through the Olive Trees. And so that's another interesting part of Through the Olive Trees, is that you're seeing some of the actors from the town of Koker, or from the area where they filmed the first movie. And the second one, as I've talked about in part 2, is And Life Goes On. And here's the front and back of that again with the supplemental materials. And finally, Through the Olive Trees, as I mentioned before. And you can see with each of the covers here that, again, it's a very layered approach with these windows into the media, this Blu-ray here. So this is all open. And as I've said before, I feel like Criterion Collection has done such an amazing job with interlacing these films together. They are so well connected. So that's part 3 of my discussion on the Koker trilogy. I highly recommend picking up this box set. I have to say it's one of my favorites now, next to the Bergman box set, which of course has many, many more films in it. But this is one of my favorites. I love, of course, Criterion Collection films, and I'm finding favorites as I go. But I've really enjoyed exploring these films. It's the first time I've seen these films, and they just look amazing on Blu-ray. As I mentioned in some earlier videos, every frame to me is a painting. And you do see many of the same elements that you would see in a Kiarostami film, in that there's a lot of driving sequences. Many times he'll use the car window as a frame for many of the scenes that he is shooting. There's usually a mirror on the car, so you see not only what's outside the window, but also who's walking behind the car, as an example. So these scenes in the films themselves are very multi-layered. And in fact, I think Through the Olive Trees was described as kind of a meta-narrative approach to filmmaking, in that there's a film inside a film inside a film type of thing. So hope you enjoyed this video. I really appreciate all the subscribers and all the comments and everyone watching these videos. It's really meant a lot to me, so thank you so much. Please leave a comment below. Let's continue the dialogue below. If you have any questions about this particular box set, again, I'm not an expert, but I'm happy to answer any questions or give you my impressions of the films. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I would really appreciate that. And I hope everyone's having a great month. And as we get close to the end of the year here, I wish everyone well, and I'll see you next time.